The complete installation guide for Logistick's Intermodal Wedge, the one-way solution for securing light to medium weight loads in intermodal shipping containers. After loading the cargo, determine the best location for installation. Keep in mind that multiple sets of intermodal wedge may be needed to safely secure your cargo. The intermodal wedge is designed to fit either on the peak or in the valley of the container wall. Choose an area that will place the intermodal wedge closest to the freight and at the same height and position, assuring the beam will be installed parallel to the floor. The beam needs to be as close to the freight as the container ribs will allow, helping prevent the cargo from starting to shift. The entire application area must be clean and dry to ensure proper installation. Use a dry cloth and, if needed, a scraper and rubbing alcohol to remove loose dirt, dust, condensation, or frost from the application area. Remove the tape backing from one intermodal wedge and place it in the desired application area, pressing it firmly on the wall. After removing the tape backing from the second intermodal wedge, place it on the opposite wall at the same height and position as the first. Important: once the intermodal wedge is installed, it cannot be repositioned. A single 4x4 is recommended with the intermodal wedge. However, two 2x4s that are the same length and nailed or screwed together can be used as a replacement for the 4x4. For light loads, a single 2x4 oriented horizontally can be used. Measure the inside width of the container at the application area, for example, peak to peak or valley to valley. For proper fit and pressure, the wood beam needs to be, on average, 1 inch less than the inside width. For flexible areas, start with the beam 3/4 of an inch less than the inside width. For rigid areas, start with a beam 1 1/4 inch less than the inside width. When installing on lift points, start with a beam 2 inches less than the inside width. A longer beam creates more outward pressure to maximize performance. Place one end of the 4x4 or 2x4s oriented horizontally into the pocket of the first intermodal wedge, and rest the opposite end of the beam at the top of the ramp on the second intermodal wedge. Force the beam down the ramp of the second intermodal wedge until it is under the retention clips and locked into place. You may need to push the container wall outward to get the beam started on the ramp. If this is too difficult, trim 1/8 of an inch off the end of the beam and reattempt installation. For added strength, drive a 1.5 to 2 inch deck screw through the side of the wedge and into the center of the beam, unitizing the system. If necessary, use void filler between the beam and the freight to prevent the freight from starting to shift. Maximum outward pressure equals maximum performance. The complete removal guide for Logistick's Intermodal Wedge, the one-way solution for securing light to medium weight loads in intermodal shipping containers. If present, remove the screws. Place a pry bar down into the center slot of the intermodal wedge and behind the beam. Pry the beam upward in small increments until it has cleared the retention clips. Use caution as the beam may eject with some force. Optional: use a forklift to slowly lift one side of the beam out of the wedge pocket. Use caution to not damage the freight. To remove the intermodal wedge from the wall, place a pry bar up into the removal slot at the bottom of the intermodal wedge. Apply slow and steady downward pressure to pry the intermodal wedge off the wall. Use a cloth and, if needed, a scraper and a citrus-based adhesive remover to clean any remaining tape residue from the container walls.